Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 51, Thursday, January 14th, 2021.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney. Welcome back. Hey, happy 2021. And let's talk about some Once Upon a Times and Happily Ever Afters.
Yes, happily ever after, and a happy new year to you and to our listeners. As we shared in our last episode, Chronicle Books was kind enough to gift us a few items, so we wanted to say a huge thank you to them again for this other book that we're covering today, The Disney Princess, A Celebration of Art and Creativity. Emily, can you share some high-level details about the text and its author?
Yes, so I'm going to take this from the press release that we got from Chronicle Books. And here is some details about The Disney Princess, A Celebration of Art and Creativity. In every classic Disney fairy tale, the princess is at the center of these beloved stories, icons beloved for their wit, heart, and soul. Now with the release of The Disney Princess, A Celebration of Art and Creativity, fans and collectors get a closer look at how each of these princesses came to be. Exploring each Disney princess from 1937 to present day, a spectacular, image-rich, and eye-catching book is one fans will turn to again and again. Within, fans will find 200-plus colorful images, including reference photos, storyboards, and never-before-seen concept art from archival collections within Disney, a brief history of how Disney became known for its princess films, dedicated chapters exploring the genesis and development of each princess, Snow White, Belle, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida, and Moana. The Disney Princess, A Celebration of Art and Creativity, is the definitive celebration of the Disney Princess. Now, this book is by Charles Salmon, who is an internationally respected critic and historian of animation who has written for the New York Times, the LA Times, Variety, and National Public Radio. His books include Tales Old as Time, The Art and Making of Disney's Animated Classic Beauty and the Beast, The Art of Frozen, The Art and Making of Peanuts Animation, celebrating 50 years of television specials, The Disney That Never Was, and Enchanted Drawings, The History of Animation, which was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year and the first film book to be nominated for a National Book Critics Circle Award. Salmon also teaches the history of animation at UCLA and Chapman University. So a super well-researched book with lots of expertise and experience behind it, and it's just beautiful, and that's kind of where I wanted to start. That's where I wanted us to start because you got the book first in the mail. And the first thing you said, you're like, oh my God, Emily, wait till you see this book. It's so pretty.
Yeah, so this was a surprise. I remember I have the UPS like free tracking, gives you a heads up when you have a package coming specifically through UPS. And I got an email that was like, you have a package coming in 2 days. And I was like, that's weird. I didn't order anything. And then when I looked at the package details, it specifically said, Courtney, Book of the Mouse Club, and then my address. And I was like, did somebody find my address on the internet? What is this? I'm confused. And I don't think it said Chronicle Books. I think it was their parent company, maybe Hatchet Books. I don't know. We were very confused. It's like, Emily, what's going on? Are you getting a package? And you did a few days later, since we live in different states. But it turns out it was from our friends at Chronicle Books. And last year we had interviewed Didier Guez. And while we were facilitating and setting up that interview, we gave them our information. So that's how we got this book as a surprise, which was fun. But yeah, when I opened this, one, I was excited because it's fun to get a package and not know what it is. And I was like, what book could it be? And then I opened it and I was like, oh my gosh, here's Snow White on the cover. It's very pink. It has a pink ribbon. And my absolute favorite detail is the pages themselves are like a shiny holographic texture, or like when it shines in the light. Thank you, that's the word. It shines in the light, and I was just like, Emily, this is so pretty. I think I might have like unboxed it for you on Skype.
Yeah,
because we didn't know what was happening. So you could see it with me.
We got this book before The Art of Soul, even though we've discussed The Art of Soul first. So once we knew, we're now used to seeing Chronicle books come through our mailboxes. But yes, when you said that you got a book from them, mine hadn't arrived yet. And so we FaceTimed each other and you showed it to me. And readers, it is truly a beautiful book. It might be one of the most beautiful books I have on my bookshelf. It's a beautiful hardcover. It kind of has that like canvas front on the bottom. You said the metallic pages. Every page is a glossy page. Like, it's thick paper. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I was really excited.
A lot of work.
Got it back in November, but we were about to start our Mark Davis 2-part episode. So I was like, okay, well, like, we can do this in January, a fun way to kick off the year. Then surprise, like 2 weeks later, we got the Soul book. And I was like, okay, well, we'll like squeeze that in because I want to do it when the movie's coming out. So that's just a little behind the scenes on our planning schedule. So even though it took a few months, I was so excited to dig into this. And this was actually the first book that I've read this year. We've shared that we both like to count and keep track of things on Goodreads. So this was an excellent way to start off reading, I think, for this podcast and just my personal reading for the year.
Yeah, so beyond the physical look of the book, what else did you think about format, readability?
I found it really easy to breeze through. I feel like I spent like maybe I'd say about 15 to 20 minutes per princess per chapter. So each of the chapters is organized by the princesses. So I think, like I could go like 3 at a time. That was about an hour of reading. But then by the end, I was like, it's so good. And I just like finished it Sunday morning. But I think I just like blew through the last 6 of them. I will say, for the layout, the font is a little small. I feel like that was an interesting layout choice in that it's laid out like you're reading a newspaper article where it's 2 stacked columns side by side, or a magazine article. And it was like I found myself squinting a little. Maybe as I get older, it's time for glasses. Like when I was trying to read at lunch, obviously I did not want to get my pizza bagel or anything on this book because it's so pretty. But I was like, oh man, the text is a little tiny. So there were some spaces, like a bit of like white space that I found that to be like, I wonder why they made that choice in terms of the layout. But overall, loved seeing the images. This was a lot of never before seen concept art. I think we've been able to experience that a lot within the Chronicle book text, including the They Drew as They Pleased series. So like you're always in for a treat when it comes to the images.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the artwork. Is beautiful, and every princess at some point has like a full 2-page piece of artwork. I loved, my favorite part of actually each chapter was the beginning of the chapter. So it has like the princess's name with the chapter title, a full page image of the princess. But I loved that next page, which had a big quote with a piece of concept art about, and that quote just related to some reason of why someone felt drawn to this story. That could be an animator, it could be a director. In some cases, it was Walt Disney himself. But I really enjoyed, like, that quote really like hooked me in and brought some emotion to why Disney and the people who worked on these films really loved these stories. And I really liked that nice transition of like, oh, and here's the next princess, and here's why someone loved this story, and then you're pulled right in.
I found the chapters a bit formulaic, but not in a bad way. Like almost comforting. Like I knew exactly what I was in for, and I feel like that made it easy to do like 3 at a time. Like I don't think I would do the whole thing in one sitting, but I was like, all right, it kind of works out that 3 at a time initially was like, all right, those are the first 3 waves of princesses, then into the Renaissance. So it's kind of some of the beats and the research that it hit repeated for each princess, but I am a structured and organized person, and so I appreciated that.
Yes, I agree. I was going to say, I noticed in every chapter, it kind of starts with the origin of where the story comes from. Is it a Grimm fairy tale, Hans Christian Andersen, folklore? And then it moves into how Disney picked up the story. And I really like how the author integrated in a little bit of historic context. That he said, like, for each princess, like, let's take Aurora, for example. He'd be like, oh, this is based in the 14th century. Here's what a princess would have done in the 14th century. Or he was talking about Belle and how she loved to read. And he's like, these might be the books that she picked up because it's early 1800s France.
That was
so I really like
fun
some of that
me.
context.
Well, and I liked that the context of the princess was not necessarily just the time period of the film where it takes place, but the time period of when the film was released. Like, what was a woman's role in society? Keeping with our Aurora example, that's the late 1950s. Yeah, we got the 14th century perspective, but also here's what women were experiencing in the 1950s and domesticity and also fashion of the era, and how that, even though it's a 14th century taking place, the fashion of the 1950s somewhat inspires Aurora's gown. Like, we got a little bit of that in different chapters. So I liked the broad range of context that each chapter had for the princesses.
Yeah, I agree. Overall, love the format, love the feel of the book. It's larger than a standard book, but it's smaller than Mark Davis, so it was easier to hold and read, like sitting at a chair or on a couch.
I did not hurt my bed.
So it is a little bit larger, I will say, than a standard book, but it, holding wise, the readability and comfort of holding this book is a lot better than some of the concept art we've looked at in the past.
I think it would look absolutely beautiful on a coffee table, or if you were to just have it on your bookshelf in terms of the spine. Like, the Disney Princess has a foil print that also has that metallic spine to it, so it's gonna look really nice on the bookshelf.
I think we could just spend 30 minutes talking about how beautiful this book is, but there's so much more here to discuss.
Yeah, let's kick it off where the introduction is. I think it starts with a really strong quote from Glenn Keane, who's an animator and director, notably in the Disney Renaissance. He was the animator for Ariel and Pocahontas, and then played a key role in the development of Rapunzel later on in the Disney princess trajectory. And he's describing a princess. The headline for this is, "A Disney princess is not an ordinary heroine." And Glenn says, quote, "To me, what a princess has is destiny. There's a high purpose and a high calling they are born to. They've got a course that the audience knows they are set on. A heroine may have the desire for that kind of clear path, but she's got to work to get there, and you've got to spend story time to get there. With a princess, you start with a built-in momentum and purpose of the character's destiny," end quote. So do you agree with Keane when thinking about the Disney princesses, or what characteristics do you think make up a Disney princess?
So that quote hit me because I feel like we talk about Disney princesses a lot in the Disney fan community, like which princess is your favorite, but I don't think I ever considered, just kind of as a whole, what is a Disney princess, like as a genre or as a heroine category. But I think I agree with Keaton. I also took the time, I watched every movie that went with this book for all the princesses. So I was reading 3 chapters and watching 3 Disney movies at a time in between. And he does hit on something here about the idea of destiny, or that pathway. They're all looking for something more in life, or they're all overcoming something. because I think normally we think of princess, like just the word is the daughter of a king, and not all of our princesses are daughters of kings, or not all of our princesses accept their role as just a princess to be married and rule a kingdom of some sort. There's always something a little bit more. So I agree with Keen. I just had never spent a lot of time pondering that before, and I think he has a great reflection on what Disney wanted to make, or to him anyway, what Disney princesses kind of exemplify, that stand out, that make them a Disney princess versus just a princess.
Yeah, I really like that distinction, and I also feel appreciation that he focused on what the princess's journey is. I feel like so much discourse around the Disney princesses, you know, in the media maybe is like what they look like, what they should or should not look like, what are the standards of beauty, and this moves beyond that surface level of appearance and really talks about who they are, what they want, as you said, and what journey they're on. In terms of like script writing or storylining, you often hear the hero's journey, like Star Wars, you're following Luke's journey and the different plot points, but this frames it in a feminine light of the journeys that we see for each of these princesses. I feel like that was a great way to kick off this text and what Charles Solomon was trying to do in exploring each of those princesses individually.
Yeah, so I want to read a part here that kind of follows. It says, if the title of princess suggests high birth, beauty, and destiny, being a Disney princess raises the stakes even higher. When he was designing characters for various films, Keen realized this version of the character would be the one most people would know from then on. It had to be the very best work he could do. His fellow artists shared his awareness of the audience's expectations, which led them to strive to outdo themselves. And I think we see that because we're going to talk about the progression next of how the princesses have changed or evolved. Maybe not changed. Evolved is a better word. And I think we see that because a lot of emphasis in this book is not just about the character, but also about the artwork and how these character stories push these artists to do better, not only to just make their work the best it could be, but also do right by these stories and ideas that they believed in so much.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about that evolution? You and I discussed, there's numerous ways we could go about this. We could seriously go princess to princess. But for sake of efficiency as well as depth, we're going to do this about 3 princesses at a time. It was interesting how these kind of break up nicely. Our princess eras are like 3 or 4 princesses a piece. So I broke this into 3 sections. I have the classic era, which is Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora. The Renaissance / the 90s, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan. And I said more contemporary princesses, Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida, and Moana. So let's start with just the character. We'll talk about artwork next. How about we do that? How did you see the characters evolve through these different eras?
Okay, I literally wrote a paper on this in college. So I love the way that you organized it because that is similar to how I organized it in my paper. I took a women's studies, women in the media course, and our final capstone project that semester was to come up with a thesis and something you wanted to explore around women in the media, and it was a really broad topic. And I'm going to go on a tangent here because I just want to say that I'm really proud of how I did my presentation. You had, in addition to writing the paper, you had to pitch your paper to the class, and I got up at the front of the lecture hall. And, you always have to have a hook for your presentation. And I opened with the 90s Blue Castle and the do-do-do-do-do-do-do, but on key because it was actually the clip from YouTube, not me singing it. But the classic castle image that kicked off all of our VHS tapes. So I'm preaching to the choir of my classmates. And I was I love Disney movies. I love Disney princesses, and I want to track their evolution from Snow White all the way up to modern time. Interestingly, this was spring of 2013, so Frozen hadn't even come out yet. And once Frozen came out, I was man, I want to like update my paper because there's so much to talk about in Frozen. But I picked two princesses from each of these eras that you've defined. I did Snow White and Aurora because I feel like there's a lot of parallels between them and their story, and like falling asleep and having the prince kiss them to wake them up. For the 90s, I picked Ariel and Jasmine. As much as it's going to come up, you and I love Belle. It's like, I don't want to dissect my favorite Disney princess.
It's like until you don't get to know your heroes.
Right, exactly. But also, I felt like Jasmine doesn't get a lot of love, and it was really fun to engage with her. And Ariel, I feel like I really should include because it's exactly 30 years between Aurora and Ariel. And then the contemporary end, in terms of what was available to me at that time, I did Tiana because I think she just has such a strong story. Like, she has such a strong work ethic, and what drives her is a definite shift. And I picked Merida because it was 2013, 2012 was when that film came out, very recent, and the excitement of having the first Pixar princess. So I do agree with your classification, and I'm really excited to dive into these eras. I think there are very strong distinctions between each of them and how they're a reflection of their time, which is something that I explored in my paper, and also that comes through within the historical context of this text.
So let's take this one era at a time. So classic era, Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora. Just a general overview. How would you describe the Disney princess of classic Disney?
I would use the word domestic in a sense. I found something in terms of watching those films, like we see them do a lot of domestic tasks. Like Snow White opens with her kind of like scrubbing the steps of the palace. Cinderella, much of the beginning of her film are her domestic tasks around her chateau, I guess, serving her stepmother and her stepsisters. Aurora breaks away from that a little bit. Like, she does have responsibilities along with the domesticity of the three fairies that serve as mother figures to her. And I felt like that's a reflection of the time span that we're looking at. The women's roles of the late 1930s to the late 1950s is it typically is a housewife. So I felt a reflection in there. What did you see?
Maybe this is a reflection of the artwork, but I think of story as well. The word that I just kept thinking of was fairy tale, was storybook. We're going to talk about the art, but like it seemed like something out of, it's what you think of. It's so quintessential fairy tale to me. There's a little bit of magic in all of these. There's fairies there. Yeah, 2 out of the 3 have fairies.
Yeah.
There's magic spells, there's witches, there's good versus evil. And overall, all 3 of these heroines have essentially no flaws. The world has been tough on them, and therefore they deserve their happily ever after. I think we see a lot of, like you said, those virtues that are the word I want. Valued, I guess is the word I want, in women, particularly between the 30s and the 50s to the 60s. Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, they're innocent in their own ways. They're kind. They want to help others. So therefore, like, we see a lot of those qualities, the domesticity as well.
Yeah.
I agree on that. And there's nothing wrong about that, but I think it's just so quintessential, just like this poor woman, look how great she is. The world, there should be some justice, and then she gets that justice in some way. I like how they're all distinct in their own sense, because I think prior to reading this book, even though we're classifying this by eras, and we're now talking about them in general, they are each their own character, and I don't think I've ever considered how unique each character is. Like, I really enjoyed the Cinderella chapter, because I didn't realize a little bit how she's a little bit more spunky. Yeah. Maybe not as outwardly as like
Jasmine
Rapunzel is, or Jasmine, but she gets a couple sarcastic comments in there.
That's true.
She teases the mice and the birds, and I don't think some of the smaller personality traits came out as much for me because I think about that classic era as just being like, the storybook. Once upon, like literally, it's Once Upon a Time, Happily Ever After. All three of them have the storybook opening in the Disney films, which is beautiful. I love that. Um, but yeah, that's what I think about. It's just feel good. It's bedtime story.
Yes, and we need to give these princesses more credit because I feel like these three are often the one that people criticize. Like, oh, like I've heard celebrities say, like, yeah, my daughter can watch Frozen, but I don't want her to watch Cinderella or Snow White because she just marries the first man that she met. But I think for two in particular, their I want isn't centered around a man. For Cinderella, there's like a quote that gets thrown around. Cinderella didn't want a prince. She wanted a night off and to go to a ball. And, you know, she works hard and she's like, I want to go to this party, not to become wed to the prince, but just to experience dressing up and having a good time. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like Aurora wants freedom. Like, she's horrified when she finds out she's a princess and that she's betrothed to this man. I mean, part of it's because she like met a man, but spoiler alert, that's the man she's betrothed to. It kind of all works out. But like, she's like, I want a taste of freedom. I've been hidden in this forest for years. So I think we need to give more credit to these princesses, and this book does such a good job of like going more in depth and beneath the surface.
Something you just touched on as you were explaining the aside about Prince Philip. It's the man she wants to marry but doesn't want to marry. Hindsight, it's the same guy. I love, especially with Cinderella and Aurora, we really see, you said that context of the time they were made, the 1950s sitcom
Yes.
is in there because like with Aurora, that twist, there's a miscommunication about something, but lo and behold, it's all going to be fine in the end. Granted, we get an awesome dragon battle in between. I'm a big Prince Philip fan. I think he's a good prince. He fights a dragon. It's pretty awesome. The guy also can dance really well.
All good qualities.
He's got range. But I saw that reflected not only like in the fashion you said, but also just how the story lays out. And I think we see that in Cinderella as well. Like they talk about the king and how he's not a strong character. Like you don't really need him, but he kind of puts things in motion. Without the king wanting his son to get married so he can have grandkids, you get the fun little, you know, the king doing silly things like pretending he's a horse for his grandkids or whatever. That seemed very 1950s sitcom to me, where like they're in a side character that you don't spend a ton of time with, but they make you laugh. So I saw that context come through. And yeah, just overall, I do have a bigger respect, I think, for this classic era, other than that feel good classic fairy tale vibes that I still get from them and I still associate with this era. But I think from this book, though, I agree. I have a more of a respect for the individual characters.
And we need to give it up to Snow White because we would not be discussing any of this if that film had not succeeded in the way that it did. And there's a great quote on page 22 from Diane Disney Miller, that's Walt's daughter, and she says, quote, "It was and still is the perfect plot. It has sympathy going for it all the way," end quote. So I think that really aligns with what you were saying about just being a quintessential fairy tale and giving you those feel-good moments. So also want to just pay my respect to Snow White because she is absolutely adorable and I do like her as well.
I'm going to carry that piece of her quote that you said, that sympathy throughout. I think that is something, as much as we can differentiate each of these princesses, that they all have in common. You feel for them in some way. Either that's some sort of relatable trait, a relatable want. You have something that you can identify with. And we see that, I think, let's transition that into the 90s. That's something that still pulls through, but we get some different vibes. It's 30 years between Aurora and Ariel. And to me, the 90s
to 89.
And to me, the Renaissance is where we get the Disney princess brand. This idea of the Disney princess. I think prior to that, Disney just happened to have 3 movies that had princesses, but now we have this powerhouse genre that Disney created.
Powerhouse is absolutely the word for it, and you and I grew up with the Disney Princess brand. I mean, early in our toddler years, those films are coming out, but I would agree, like, once Mulan hit theaters, I feel like that was 98, and then in the early 2000s, they become this cohesive brand, like a t-shirt with all the princesses on them. And I think that's a testament to that they had a more diverse range of characters once you have this lineup, and just more strong and distinct personalities. A big thing that jumped out to me in the 90s, reading this, and also as I was writing that paper, is how driven the princesses of the 90s are. They take charge. They speak up about what they want. Ariel talks back to her dad. You and I make fun of it because she says, "But Daddy, I'm 16. I'm not a child." And then you and I go, "Well, yes, you are, Ariel." Yes, you are. That's when you know you're old. But you see that strength coming up because she's going after what she wants and her appreciation for the human world. Jasmine, God, I love the quote, "I am not a prize to be won." Like, that's such a strong moment for her character in that film, and I really honed in on that in that paper. I wish I could find that paper. I don't have any files from college, but I was like, man, I could turn that paper into a book.
Here's a quote from the Ariel chapter that kind of shows their intentional shift from the classic era to this new era of princess. This is from, sorry, they just say he throughout. I'm trying to get who. This is from co-director John Musker. He says, "I wanted her to be a different kind of heroine than Snow White or Sleeping Beauty, who seemed rather passive. We thought of Ariel as someone who wanted to take charge of her own destiny and make choices, and was not only active in the dramatic sense, but in a physical sense. She swam, she got engaged, she participated in the battle at the end and in the climax. We are trying to make her an agent of her own fate, not someone who was acted on by others. So that was a conscious decision." And I think this is, like you said, I don't want to, downplay Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora, but they are more reactive than proactive.
They're a little passive. And not that that's bad. That's the expectation of women at that time. But, once you get to these 90s films, you're in, I guess, second wave feminism, bursting through the glass ceiling, active women's roles, women's lib. So it becomes a bit of a reflection of that. And I like that they consciously made these women distinct. I mean, we saw distinctions in the classic era, but we have a quote directly here in Belle's chapter where one of the directors says, quote, "We didn't want Belle's characterization to go in the same direction as Ariel's. Ariel was definitely the all-American teenager. We pictured Belle as a little older, a little wiser, and a little more sophisticated. In addition, Belle is very protective of her father, unlike Ariel." So, they're thinking of these women, their characterization in terms of how they act, but also their relationships with their family. We see different dynamics at play.
Yeah, I really think we just see, like you said, the different dynamics. We have a more rounded character. And I think we have more of a character arc for the princesses starting in the 90s than we did. Like Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, they don't change. They are who they are. They are pure of heart. They are always kind, loving. Like they said, they're reactive. The plot is moved on because people do things to them. And that's where our sympathy comes from in the classic era is these poor women, they've done nothing wrong. They're good people. Why are they in such circumstances? But with these new characters in the Renaissance and forward, they have more of an arc. Ariel comes to a conclusion that she acted a little foolishly. Maybe she doesn't outright say it, but you see her grow up a little bit from the beginning to the end. And I think those arcs get stronger as we go. They're definitely the strongest in the contemporary era than in the Renaissance. But we start to see that I think there's almost more of a journey because they're taking the journey themselves.
And I like how we see for a lot of these princesses their journey in comparison to the hero or often the prince that we'd associate with them. Look, I'm gonna criticize the classic era princes a little bit, and some of the I'm thinking specifically of Snow White and Cinderella. our Prince Charmings are kind of interchangeable. Like, we don't really get a lot from them.
Whenever people who don't recognize the difference between Prince Charming and Prince Adam?
No, we do not use Prince Adam. That is referred to for Beauty and the Beast, and I don't agree with it. It's not real.
The Prince? Is that Snow White? It's just the Prince.
I've heard Snow Prince. I don't blame them for.
They don't even have names.
Look, I don't blame people for getting them mixed up. But I think we see a lot of growth in terms of these princesses' interactions with their men. Like, Jasmine's a little hesitant of Aladdin first. I mean, she likes him when she meets him in the marketplace, but when he's Prince Ali, she's like, this dude's a little full of himself. But also because I love Belle so much, I found another quote. And look, this is for all the haters who say that Belle has Stockholm Syndrome, and, like, I don't agree. And I feel like this quote really goes into how her relationship and companionship with the Beast evolves. This quote says, "The artists agree a turning point for the character occurs in the scene Chapman wrote and storyboarded of Belle giving Beast first aid after he's rescued her from the wolves. For the first time, she stands up to him, yelling back when he roars at her, and then gently thanking him. Quote, I really put myself into that scene. If someone talked to me like that, I would give it right back to them," end quote, she explains. Then quote picks back up. "I don't think I realized it, but it was the first time a Disney heroine had argued with her hero. Before, she argued with Beast because she was afraid of him and didn't like him and was angry that she didn't get to say goodbye to her father. That scene was a turning point. He had saved her life, and she realized there was something more in him than just the Beast. Belle was comfortable scolding him because she knew he wouldn't hurt her," end quote. And I think that's a great way to show how she progresses in her feelings and the complexity of what occurs for her.
And I think they noted that Belle, or in a way, said she's not the first princess to fall in love at first sight. In a way, because she sees Eric, she's in love. Even though Cinderella wasn't looking for a prince, she wanted a night out. As soon as she was dancing, she was caught up, and so this is love.
I was gonna say, they sang a whole song about it.
The whole song. It's the only time we hear him talk, other than, "Hey, wait, what's your name?" So she was the first princess, and we start to see again like those different dynamics. I think they're more subtle in this 90s Renaissance era, because I feel like in the contemporary, like, we all cheered with Frozen, where they were like, "You can't marry a man you just met." And we're like, finally, thank you. But to some credit, there are some of those. Yes, she's still going to end up with the first man that she had a friendship relationship with, but it's not this. In the 90s, we do get a shift after Ariel of, it's not love at first sight. Jasmine, the same. It took her time to get there.
And in Pocahontas, they make a great point in this book, by traditional standards of like what you would call a happy ending or happily ever after, ending up with the prince. Pocahontas and John Smith don't stay together. He goes back to England. I mean, they had to kind of rely on a little bit of historical accuracy in that, like, she didn't marry him, she married John Rolfe, and that's Pocahontas 2, Journey to a New World. But the text talks about how, this was another deviation from the norm. It's not like happily ever after riding off into the sunset and a castle in the background. It's, sometimes you have these wonderful moments with people, and that's what they were. They were a moment. That's going to stick with you, but your journey and their journey go on a different path, and you continue on. And I appreciate that realistic look at a relationship.
I have that quote here. That was one that I flagged. I thought it was so powerful. This comes from... Sorry, not every paragraph has the person's name, so I want to make sure. Okay, this is from Glenn Keane. He says, "I really think it was a bold choice for us to make a Disney feature with a beautiful heroine and the love story between her and Smith, and have it end with them not together. It's not what you go into a Disney film to get, because it's usually a dream come true. The fulfillment was the societies coming to a peaceful agreement to live together because of their love. In the grander scheme of things, I don't know if that's a tragedy."
Yeah, I like that it takes her journey not just beyond it takes it beyond what she experienced and like what an impact that supposedly has on on her community. I mean, I'm sure there's a whole different path of historical
We
accuracy.
do want to note that we recognize, and they're very explicit in this
They
text,
are.
which I appreciated, that they included from Disney animators, storytellers, and the company that they were not trying to make a biopic. They know it is not historically accurate, but the themes are still something that we can take away, that there are some greater goods here than just a man and a woman end up together and live happily ever after. That happily ever after can look different. So moving into our contemporary, I do want to note in the Disney Renaissance is where we get our first princesses of color, and we get 4 of them back to back as we move into the contemporary. After Belle, I feel like we have those very classic fairy tales still: Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Jasmine, Belle, even Jasmine, her story 100 and what is it? Arabian Nights,
1001 Nights.
1001 Tales. Those are those classic, I guess, like bedtime fairy tale stories. But when we transition to Jasmine, we get Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tiana. We get princesses of color. And I wholeheartedly agree there's a lot more space to diversify and represent cultures and ideas through the Disney princess brand. But I thought it was intriguing that I don't think I had never noticed that they were back to back, because we have so many films also in between. But if we look at the princess brand, we do have 4 princesses of color back to back, which I think is great.
Representation is so important, and I think the quote that kicks off Tiana's chapter, there's always a beautiful, kind of like intricate, I would say almost Art Deco for each of them, where it's like symbols from the princess that kicks off the chapter, still another piece of concept art, and then a quote that's on just a page by itself. And this is from Anika Nani Rose, the voice of Tiana, and she said, quote, "What Tiana has done, in addition to showing little brown children that they too are regal, is showing their friends that they too are regal." So not just representation for the little girls to see it in themselves, but like recognition for others about these stories and why they deserve to be told and to be at the forefront.
So moving from our Renaissance, we have the more proactive princess. What do you see in the contemporary era? The Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida, Moana.
I see a deeper drive within these princesses and a deeper motivation that often removes itself from men being any real central part of the story. It kind of takes what we saw in the Renaissance to the next level. I think, as we said, Ariel gets a little criticism for like, you can't marry a man you just met, but like Tiana, her initial drives, she has this dream of owning a restaurant and like fulfilling the cooking dreams that she had with her father before he passed away in war. And yeah, she meets Naveen along the way, and he kind of helps her find balance, but it's not about her and Naveen, it's about her ultimately reaching that dream. And what I love about Tiana, what I talked about in my paper, is that she kind of throws the Disney trope of like wishing on stars on its head. Like she says to her friend, like, I can't go wishing on stars, like I'm gonna make my dream come true myself. So having that drive and like looking, it's fun to wish, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wishing and dreaming, but I think what Tiana says is, I'm gonna take that dream and use that to motivate me to make it happen for myself. And we see that hard work within her. For Rapunzel, it's a longing to see something outside of her own tower. Like she just wants to get out, and she sees Flynn as a means to an end to just go see the lanterns that are on her birthday and see this magical piece. And like, yes, again, they fall in love along the way, but it's a deeper drive that's ultimately taking her to where she wants to be. For Merida, she doesn't even want to get married, and we don't have a love piece in there. She's like, I'm going to shoot for my own hand. I'm going to be in charge of my own destiny or my own fate. And for Moana, I see it.
It's just not even in the story.
Yeah, there's no
romance at all.
No romantic element. It's her kind of similar to Rapunzel, like wanting to get beyond her island, but connecting with her culture and her culture's past and being explorers and wayfinders.
Yeah, I think in this contemporary era, we also see the princesses move beyond the happily ever after. Like, we kind of get a glimpse of like their life afterwards.
Yeah.
Like Ariel, it ends with her getting married. Belle, it ends with a nice, beautiful ballroom dance. Jasmine, she rides off into the sunset on a magic carpet. Pocahontas, I
That's
think,
where
has
this
more of
is
a
where we
definite
start to see
conclusion.
the shift.
Yeah, I think Pocahontas, you could even. Yeah, I agree. Pocahontas is really that shift into the contemporary. But even
But the
Mulan,
after,
he shows up for dinner.
do you
And
want to stay forever?
I love that line. But that's like about it. Whereas Tiana, yes, she marries Naveen, but then we see her get the restaurant still. Like there's a little bit more past
That's
Happily
not the
Ever
end
After.
moment.
Rapunzel reunites with her family. They could have ended there. They really could have. Now we've gotten more beyond that. She has a television series. She has an animated short. But we still get a little bit more dialogue that we know she goes on to really take on her role as being a leader and leading her kingdom. Even though it's Flynn telling us that, it's not just they had a happy kiss, she reunited with her family, big hug, and credits. There was just a little bit more there. And same with Merida, same with Moana. Like we get just even that 2 minutes of they've reached a conclusion of some sort, but they're moving even further. It just doesn't end with, and they lived happily ever after the end. There's more after the end.
I agree. And there's a nice quote kind of circling back to what we were saying about like heroes and heroines and the relationship between prince and princesses. It's actually like kind of the last quote before we get to the afterword, and it is attributed to Lin-Manuel Miranda since he did the music for Tangled. And he sums up that chapter saying, what did I say?
You said Tangled.
Oh, my bad. I'm just like flipping through the book. Thank you. So we're on Moana, and he says, quote, "And the things we make are part of our times. I feel very hopeful. I feel very grateful that we managed to create a Disney heroine who isn't looking for a boyfriend. She's saving her family. She's saving her island. She's saving the world. I'm very proud to be a part of that world." And I'm like, I'll see what you did there, Lin-Manuel Miranda. But yeah, I think that's a really nice way to close before we get to the afterword and like the final thoughts, like the evolution of these princesses and where we'll go next. I'm not sure if Raya and the Last Dragon, like, is that going to be considered a princess? Do we need to move beyond the realm of princesses into just Disney heroines? Like, does she enter that world? We'll see what's in store in terms of princesses and how they are integrated into this brand, but I think that's a really strong point about Moana and how it's evolved.
And again, as we were reading this, I want to reiterate what I said earlier, that spending time with each princess individually, reading about their backstory, they're all so unique and individual in their own ways, even though we have, for sake of the podcast, we talked about them in errors, and there are things that kind of group them together that way. They're all unique and have every single one of them. When I was taking my notes, they're all a first for something. Snow White being
like that.
the
I'd
first
love to
princess.
hear your notes.
They all
on
have
that.
a first something that fits with them.
Can you share
something? Oh, all right. Going into the notes here. So all of these princesses matter, like all of their films matter either for first or where they fit in with the company. So like Snow White is the first full-length animated feature. It's the first animated musical. This is what puts Disney on the map. Cinderella kind of reiterates that, saves the Disney company, and we have now the beginning of like the golden era of animation. And then Sleeping Beauty, this is what helps launch Disneyland, because this is going to be the castle. So even if they're not necessarily everyone's favorite princesses, we can't have things without them.
Definitely.
In the Renaissance, we get a lot of firsts. Ariel is the first, The Little Mermaid's the first film to use caps. It's not used as, I think, we tend to think of Beauty and the Beast, but from this book, it said the last scene with the boat going into the sunset or into the distance with the rainbow, that was caps. the new computer animation. Beauty and the Beast is well known for it because of the ballroom scene. It's more in depth, but it wasn't the first time being used.
It stands for Computer Animation Production System.
Yes. Beauty and the Beast, this is our first character to not fall in love at first sight. First character who's considered an intellectual. She kind of gets more of a trait that defines her a little bit more with a hobby or something to that effect. Jasmine from the film Aladdin. This is our first princess of color and our first non-European story. Pocahontas, first indigenous princess, but also the first film to be based off of a real person in history, a real time period, a real place, not a fairy tale that we can put in a context of it's in France somewhere in this rough time. It's an actual place with an actual time period with actual real historic characters, even if it plays out fictionally. Mulan is our first Asian princess, as well as first to really be more of a myth or a legend versus a fairy tale. We also continue to see more use of the CAPS program. So Tiana from Princess and the Frog is our first African-American princess. And I think we could also say first true contemporary. She's in the 1920s. All other princesses take place probably 1800s or before. Tangled, this is our first completely computer animated film. Brave is the first Pixar princess. And Moana is the first Polynesian princess. That's something else that now that jumps out to me as I'm going through these individually. The contemporary era, I think, is also more characterized by culture.
Yeah, I could see that.
Than just story.
Mulan becomes the bridge to that, I feel like, because they really embrace themselves in the Chinese culture. This text talks about the research process that went into that, into understanding that legend. So I definitely see Mulan as a bridge between those princesses. Even though there's about 11 years between Mulan and Tiana, like that kind of kicks off, like, let's really immerse ourselves in the culture of some of these people and let that influence not only the story, but some of the artistic style, which I think is a great segue into another heart of this book, is the artwork itself. What did you notice about the artwork for each of these princesses going through?
Something that I noticed throughout the book when the animators would talk about their animation, from the classic era to contemporary, there was really a shift from let me show you what animation can do. So like the beautiful animation of Mark Davis of the transformation of Cinderella's dress. Gorgeous. But that was like a look what animation can do. Let me show off this medium and why it's so special. To by the time throughout even the 90s and especially into the contemporary, they talk about how do they make less motion matter? And throughout each film, there's less and less big animation show-off moments, and it's more about the subtleties in trying to make these characters as lifelike as possible. And I had never really considered that before, but as I was also watching the films while reading this book, I did notice that even Ariel, she's less over the top than, I don't want to say over the top, like, you know, she makes really big gestures, but like the animation's a little less over the top than Snow White or Cinderella, but Moana is by far the least over the top motion wise. It's more about the scenery. It's about the subtleties. How lifelike can it be? And I really do see how they've used the princess brand and the princess storytelling, as well as the other films, to really rein in and explore what is animation and what can animation do for storytelling.
Yeah, I liked seeing the concept art of kind of how these princesses came to be. We kind of talked about concept art a little bit in our last exploration, which was of Soul and the art of that film. But just, we played a really fun game on Instagram, if you missed it in our story, sorry, where I took pictures of the concept art and let people guess multiple choice which princess was which. And there was a Snow White one that stumped quite a few people because it's actually like a cute little image of Snow White, but she has red hair. And so I was like, I don't know. know, who is it gonna be? But in terms of, I want to cycle back to we were talking about culture, especially with Moana. I'm looking at images on page 230 and 231, and because they wanted to immerse themselves in, this Polynesian culture, you have ideas for oceanic costume designs and like what she might wear as a woman of this tribe. But I also really like the one on 230 specifically, where it's different explorations for Moana's hair and like how she would wear it just to be comfortable, like serving a purpose. It's not like, oh, I'm getting my hair gussied up for a ball gown. They explored, like, all right, here's what she'd look like with a top knot, with a side braid. How is she efficiently gonna wear her hair as she's going on this journey across the ocean? Is it going to be a bun style? Is it curly and down? How does it look when it's wet versus dry, since this takes place mostly around the ocean? Whereas I feel like with a lot of princesses, their hair kind of stays the same throughout most of the film, except maybe the big moment where they're getting gussied up and looking all fancy. I'm thinking of Belle, like, she has her ponytail and then she has her yellow dress half up, half down.
Yeah.
Bun.
Interesting. Rapunzel, since you're talking about hair, Rapunzel, Merida, and Moana, they talked a lot about how hair matters for these characters and how their hair, one, we're in computer animation, so that was a whole, throughout all three, they say no matter how much better computer animation gets, hair is still the hardest thing to do. But it's so much part of their personality, and they cared so much about those details. And that's something we see that as animation progresses, especially now that they have computer animation where they can get so detail oriented, that's just so hard to do with hand drawn. We see this shift towards what else can we use in the art to portray these characters. And like Rapunzel makes sense, like it's her hair. That's the whole point of Rapunzel, let down your hair. But Merida, everyone's like, yeah, her curly red hair. But I like how they explained like why they chose curly red hair, why they chose Moana. For instance, they talked about how watching a woman when she's working, she puts her hair up because she's got work to do. And someone consciously like made that connection. And I was like, oh, you're right. Someone who has long hair, when she's got work to do, she knows how to get that hair up real fast. And how they brought that into her character. And that's made it so much more lifelike in those subtle ways that, like, again, we didn't even notice it until we started reading about it. But what's interesting in animation and in this art is that to make something lifelike, you also have to observe all of those unconscious and subtle things in life and then recreate them. So I have a lot of respect for how they've done that since Snow White. They've always strove to do that. But as they've gotten more tools, they didn't lose sight of that either.
Yeah, I think another big part of their character in terms of visually representing them is the fashion of the princesses. Like, think about in terms of merchandising. I'm sure you and I both had Princess Barbie dolls growing up. A huge part of the fashion is those Disney princess costume dresses, like whether you're playing dress up or picking who you want to be for Halloween. So what I really particularly enjoy when it comes to concept art and going through is seeing the fashion that didn't make it. Like, their outfits are iconic, and that's kind of how you can easily identify the princesses. Like Jasmine's signature teal blue two-piece top and pants and jeweled headband. Seeing other alternative fashion that they might have done for her, different colors. There's a great picture for Tiana on page 168 where it says Tiana poses in a stylish outfit with Art Deco touches. And this is a gorgeous black and white number, stylized. She has a big hat. So it was fun to see, like, picture, what would those princess costumes and toys maybe look like if that had been the fashion. So I think for me, concept art is almost like a behind the scenes glance into the process of creating these characters. So I particularly enjoy those images.
We've done a lot of concept art in our last few episodes.
Yeah, Mark Davis with theme park concept art.
We might need to go back to school, Courtney, and get some formal training in analyzing artwork. But before we move forward, there are two princesses or queens that we have not talked about in the Disney princesses, and that is Frozen's Anna and Elsa. And both you and I texted each other like, wait, where's Anna and Elsa? And then we looked it up. Where I am on right now, the princess.disney.com, the official Disney princess brand website, and they are not part of the Disney princess brand. And I don't know how I didn't know that. I really thought they were.
Well, it's confusing because you're right. They're not featured on the website, or I think what it really comes down to is merchandising. I'm gonna tell you Target for example. I like to stroll through the toy aisle on my way to it's between electronics and the food aisle in my Target, so I like to see the Disney stuff. And there are two distinct sections of like the Disney aisle. There's all of the Frozen merchandise because there's still plenty of stuff around Frozen 2. And then there's the Disney princess stuff. And like, I didn't really pick up on it until, we raised this question. Wait, why aren't they in the book? And I'm thinking about it now. There's like little mystery packs of like, oh, mystery princess toy. And it's the princesses that are in this text, but Anna and Elsa are not part of that. It's like, okay, I get it. They're different in terms of merchandising. They are different entities within the Disney company and how we frame toys and books and things. But they were in the Disney Princess section of Wreck-It Ralph. The Ralph breaks the internet, so I
loved that part
confused.
Of the movie. It was so like, cool seeing all of them together.
Princesses or not? Apparently not, according to this book.
I love when all the princesses get together. And
it's a great scene.
See that is Wreck-It Ralph was the first time on screen where all of the princesses were together. I think they were in an Oh My Disney
yes, they made it room. So that it's acceptable within the realm of Disney storytelling. Disorder kind of breaks that down for us in a great way, and there is an episode.
So they come together. That's the first time we see them all on screen, but we do often see them together in the parks, in parades, the castle steps or shows, Fantasmic. And I love when they get together in a group. I think I don't know. I love it. It's great to me when they're all together. We love when the voices come together at Disney panels, at D23 expos. But yeah, I hadn't connected that Anna and Elsa, although Anna and Elsa are with them in the parades, Festival of Fantasy, they're in that same link of floats with all the princesses. But most of the time, they are separate. They are kind of, Frozen itself is its own. Frozen's the only Disney or not Disney Princess the brand, but princesses that have a sequel, like official sequel.
Yeah, well,
not DVD sequel.
Wow, because I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas. No, I know, Mulan. They all got direct-to-video sequels, but we don't talk about them. So you're right. In terms of theatrical release, that is a distinction for those princesses. So maybe that's part of why they're there. It's its own thing. It's the dynamic of putting them in Wreck-It Ralph is what confuses me, because I can completely get on board if you're like, this is its own movie, it's about sisterhood. Technically they each, spoiler alert, become queen within the two movies, but then they put them in Wreck-It Ralph. So I don't know, it would have been nice to see them appear in this book, but I understand as a license, this isn't Disney Publishing, but it's certainly licensed through Disney. We're gonna follow what's on the DisneyPrincess.com website.
Do you think they fit with the contemporary princesses?
I think they do. As I said, I would have absolutely included them in that paper in terms of how they really turn some of the princess tropes on its head. But my paper was written, I guess, 8 months too early for me to include that. But when I saw that, I had that in mind. I was like, oh wow, it felt like a princess film and story to me, but it can be its own thing if it wants to.
Yeah, so we did, listeners, just want to bring that up because if you do get this book, don't be disappointed that they're not included. There is, as we're speculating, definitely reasons and possible logic behind this. I don't think, though, it detracts from the book and thinking about the brand of Disney Princess in any way because they're not in it. But let's wrap up talking about this book before we kind of just talk about our favorites and things we love about princesses in general. I really think the way they started with Glen Keane in the beginning, I think they equally closed as strong and reflectively at the end in the afterword, which concludes the book with a reflection of the evolution of the princesses and also animation, as we've discussed. But there's a quote from Art Babbitt, who is an animator on Snow White, and he was asked, what was the greatest piece of animation ever done? And he says, it hasn't been done yet. Everything we have done up to this point has only scratched the surface of what this art is capable of. I think the same can be said for, end quote, can be said for the Disney princesses. I kind of took his quote that like, yes, animation keeps getting better and better and better. But I think the same thing as we were talking about these princesses is they also keep getting better and better and better. And I think we could say the same, like, who's the best Disney princess? Well, maybe she hasn't been brought up yet because they just keep getting better. So I want to ask you, Courtney, what would you want to see in the next Disney princess?
I'm going to think about it in terms of story and in terms of the princess herself. I do think these princess films are strong as musicals, which the majority of them are. So I don't know. Well, you and I are both just movie musical fans. So I would love to see that remain at the heart of the animation. I think Disney animation at its best is story told through song and stories that move those things along through song. That rhymed. I guess I'm getting a little sing-songy myself. But as for the princess, I'm all for continuing to diversify the princess lineup. I think not just in look, but in representation. I mean, there's been calls to have different, maybe, gender identities or orientation is something to explore. But I also would like to see a variety of different body types. I think we started to see a different look with Moana. She doesn't have like a waist as big as her wrist. She looked very much like a shape that I am. Like I kind of saw myself, even though we're not of the same culture, but like I'm on the shorter side. I would consider myself like I don't think stocky is the right word, but just like an average build, and that was refreshing to see on screen. So I would definitely like to see that in terms of animation. But I love the characteristics of a lot of these princesses. So I think just ultimately she should remain true to what she wants, true to her heart, but also grow, because that's what we ultimately like to see at the end of a journey. I think especially in the recent films is that growth. What about you?
Similar, I want to see her continue to want something bigger and continue since the Renaissance that she's the catalyst of her plot, not reactive to other things happening around her, but she has a role to play in what's happening around her. I also kind of want to see a princess I know this can be touchy because we like our films to be timeless, but in put her in 2010 a little bit. Because I think that would also open up to having a lot more diversity, either as the princess herself or the people she's around and the people she interacts with, parents being of the same gender, whatever that looks like, more of the modern families that we have now. Diverse modern families. So I would like to see her come into the 21st century a little bit.
Literally,
because even our most contemporary, while I love the reflections of culture, while I love the timelessness of putting these stories in either the past or like an unnamed time or place, one of the strengths, I think, of the princess is that we can continue to relate to her in some way. But I would also like to see us be able to relate to her complete environment, her friends. I want to see more friends. This is something, that was some other firsts. Pocahontas is the first person to have a friend that's an actual person, not just the animal sidekicks. They all have animal sidekicks.
That's a really good point.
They all have animal sidekicks. So I want to see more interactions and friendships. Pocahontas has our
Nakoma.
friend Nakoma.
Shout out
Not
to
that there aren't
Nakoma.
other people in there, but I want to see some more friendships. That's what something
Strong
I loved about
female
Frozen.
friendships. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would like to see the Disney princess come into the 21st century so that we can not only relate to her as a character, but also relate to her environment and modern struggles and obstacles.
I love that. Well, I think it would be fun to do some quick rapid fire. I think we've had some really strong discussion today, and I've absolutely enjoyed it. But just like quick association for these princesses, maybe even just one word. If we have to, it might be tough. But all right, first up, who is your favorite Disney princess?
Belle.
Same. We've worn that on our sleeves before. Was there a princess's artwork that you enjoyed the most?
I really enjoyed Tiana's.
That was mine. So far we have the same answer.
Why do we have similar answers? We might have to do second choices.
Second choice.
I always have.
We do.
First choice is rather similar.
I really liked Jasmine too. I feel like we got to see some different angles in there. But on that note, which princess do you have a new interest or respect for after reading this book?
You know, it was Cinderella.
Okay. Not the same answer as mine, so go ahead.
So that spunkiness, because I think I did, I've fallen into the trap a little bit of, the classic era. There's nothing wrong with what they made, but, modern women that we are, the more passive princess. But after reading Cinderella's chapter, that's when granted it was only the second chapter, but that's when I realized I was like, there's a lot more here that maybe we don't give all of these princesses credit for. And because of her chapter, I looked a little more closely, especially as I was watching the films, for those little moments of, even in the earlier films in the classic era, they have more personality. And while their story might be passive, they're not passive people, while the story itself might be passive.
Mine is Snow White, just because I feel like I never really, okay, I obviously watched Snow White as a child, but it wasn't the VHS that I went to the most often. And it's like, yeah, I understand the importance of Snow White, but really getting to dive into the concept art, like, she's the map for all these princesses. That's where it starts. And she had, honestly, I think the most diverse concept art. Like, when I was setting up that game for us on Instagram, I was like, oh, I have a few good options. Like, she's blonde, she's redheaded, she's brunette. So really seeing how it came together, like what all did they consider? She was a blank page. She was a fresh start. This is the backbone of Disney animation and the Disney Princess brand. So just respect for her in that regard, but seeing how those animators ultimately came together to make this perfect fairy tale story. Do you have a favorite princess to meet and greet in the parks?
This is hard. I think my favorite place to meet princesses is Epcot.
Okay.
In the World Showcase.
Like,
I
in
really
their
enjoy
story.
Yes, I really enjoy seeing them within their culture, which is why, not to go on the Epcot tangent, like, I get the argument of not over Disneyfying Epcot, but I like the dropping of characters into their cultures. I think it helps all of us appreciate the cultures they come from. It helps us find a connection and an entryway into those cultures, particularly for kids. And I love, for instance, meeting Belle in her blue dress, her town dress in France. I love meeting Snow White by the Wishing Well. I love that Mulan. I wish we'd see her more in her warrior outfit. I think would be super awesome. I know that's like a thing for special events, but like, I love seeing her in China. I think it really roots these stories, as much as they are fairy tale or fiction, in the reality of their culture and their ideas that they represent around the world.
Yeah, you also get to meet, well, previously you could meet Belle in her Christmas dress at Christmas time.
I know that's your favorite.
I love Belle in her Christmas dress because I had a Barbie with that, and it was my favorite Barbie as a child. So I was like, it's like I'm meeting my Barbie doll. It's like Life Size, the movie, but it's me at Christmas Belle. So I would agree with you that the immersion of Epcot is nice. But I do want to give it up to Princess Fairy Tale Hall. That wasn't something that you and I got to experience as a child because it was Snow White's Scary Adventures at the time. But I think it's great that it's sometimes a rotating venue of princesses. It depends on which princess you might meet that day. And it's fun that you get to meet like two princesses at once.
And it's fun to see them interact because occasionally they do interact with each other.
Yeah.
As you're taking time with each princess because there's usually two of them meeting in spaces. So it's cool to also, again, seeing that cross Disney universe, they get to interact sometimes.
I also want to give it up for the mirrored castle float that will never die that often the princesses are on. Our Twitter friend Ellen had a wonderful tweet about watching some of like the Walt Disney World Christmas Day parades. There is, I think it's called Sam's Disney Diary. It's a YouTube channel and it has like all of them from the 80s through now, like parade, Christmas special. So I watched the 1985 one and the mirrored castle float was there and I was like, oh my god, how old is this mirrored castle float? And it turns out it premiered in 1984, so it was pretty fresh in that parade. But I was like, this thing, there will be a nuclear war, and at the end of it, there will be Twinkies, cockroaches, and that mirrored castle float. And that will be all that's left of civilization.
But yeah, so many great places to see the princesses. But yeah, the castle float, iconic. But Epcot, you and I agree, is I think the best place to meet them in their worlds. I love that. Nice little place for
a fun chat. But ultimately, would you recommend this book to a Disney fan?
100%. I think we've had nothing to say but good things about this book the whole time we've talked about it, just from how it physically looks and feels, the artwork, the stories. I think it's a great reference for each film, that if you just want that, give me 20 minutes, some more info that's not on the Blu-ray DVD features. This is just a great book for that. And I love, again, I've kept saying, I love when they all get in one place. So I love that all of the princesses are together in one book.
For sure. Well, I am not including Blu-ray DVD features in my resources this time because there would be way too many to choose between each of those princesses. And I do have to save some for any future fairy tale favorites. But I have a book that's not necessarily a Disney book, but I think if you're interested in kind of the feminist theory that I've mentioned, or like the paper, this is also similar to my thesis in that paper. Like, I really should have turned that paper into a book. This is called In Defense of the Princess: How Plastic Tiaras and Fairy Tale Dreams Can Inspire Smart, Strong Women by Jeremy Fine. And I actually read this last year in 2020. I had it on my to be read pile for a while just because the title intrigued me. I'm certainly a little girl when I'm an adult, but like I grew up from my childhood spent immersing myself in that princess culture as a kid. And I really liked Jeremy's take on how you can still be feminist, but also frilly. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's obviously a chapter and many mentions and references to Disney experiences, the films, the fairy tale culture, but she also takes it into real life princesses and, you know, how modern day monarchies and responsibilities of these adult women and the inspiration that they can have. It kind of runs the gamut of the princess spectrum. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I highly recommend that book. And just for something fun, I already mentioned it, but great to see the princesses all together. So I recommend revisiting the princess scenes in Ralph Breaks the Internet if you have Disney Plus. I believe Ralph Breaks the Internet was recently added, or it's coming soon this year.
So for my additional resources, I want to give a shout out again to our friends at Chronicle Books. Last episode, when we talked about the art of soul, the art of books are great. And we've continued yours and my exploration into concept art, the role of concept art. And they have a lot of art of books, including, while these aren't officially Disney Princess brand, Frozen and Frozen 2, Moana, and Tangled. But you can also find other art of books from Disney Editions and other publishers for Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Pretty much you can find an art book for any of your favorite Disney princesses. So if you have a favorite, maybe dive a little bit deeper into that art, find that artwork. One of my favorite things and places to see all the princesses together, and maybe one day in the parks I will get to witness this, is a coronation ceremony. So when they introduce a new princess into the Disney Princess brand, all of the princesses come together to welcome the new princess, and I love that crossover. So you can find those all over YouTube. You can look for different coronations when new princesses have been introduced into the brand. So I think those are super fun to watch, to see them all together. And then to kind of plug ourselves a little bit, we have a segment on this show that we've done, Fairy Tale Favorites, and we're going to continue that into this season. But we want to also reference back that if you enjoy Disney princesses, it's also really fun to look at the original source material. And we have so far in episode 15, started with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The Little Mermaid was episode 27. The Snow Queen, which is what Frozen is based on, is episode 31. And Cinderella is episode 41.
Perfect. So I'm sure we'll fit some more of those into our repertoire, most likely at least one this season. But next up, we're bringing back a concept that we originally premiered on episode 38, and that's a podcast party. In these special episodes, we're joined by several special guests. So this time we're reading It All Started with a Blog, Detangling the Wide Web of Disney Bloggers by Paul Lane. So in addition to hearing from the author Paul, we're going to chat with a few of the bloggers featured in the book. So keep an eye out for that episode toward the end of this month. In the meantime, you can always keep up with us on social media. We are at Book of the Mouse on Twitter and Instagram, and you can email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. If you ever want to chat Disney Princess Theory with me online, you can find me on Instagram at Great Gutsby or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can find me, Emily, on both Instagram and Twitter at Emily_McD. And Courtney, I believe it is your turn to close us out. And you never torn. There were a lot of great quotes in this book that really were reflective and resonated.
I agree. It was so great to hear from the creators and the people really behind shaping these princesses. But actually, for this, we have Booker Prize winning author and scholar Marina Warner, who kind of dissects the princesses a bit within the afterword. She says, quote, "I firmly believe the reason these stories are important is that they have the power to shape reality, not merely reflect it. With the rise of the cinema and the tremendous rise of mass media, this interplay of imaginative ideal and reality keeps happening. Fairy tales move and interact with the value of the times," end quote. And honestly, I could have just stuck that in my paper had I found that, because that would be the thesis.
Absolutely. I love it. It reflects everything we've talked about, I think, this episode, of how much we see ourselves in these Disney princesses, how much we want to continue to see them reflect our modern values and ideas, and also how much animation has evolved because of these stories.
The Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.